Whoa. Our future as a species, as this planet, as this country, as our people, and as me and you, we can only do the best to be a good example of something that is trying to better itself and be decent to other people. That's all we can do on this planet, and you know what? It's a hell of a lot of fun. And if right now, if you think, well, you know what, I don't really know how to stretch my imagination, or I don't know how to become creative, you know what? A lot of people don't know how to weight lift. But you go to a gym, you see a lot of people, and they obviously know how to weight lift. So what you got to do is you got to get into it, and you got to go after it. Well, imagination, I believe, is about the same thing. You know, there's different ways to practice your imagination and practice creativity, and just don't ever stop thinking. And don't watch a whole bunch of TV. You can watch some. And don't drink a whole bunch of wine. But you can have some. But always be thinking, always be imagining, always be true to yourself. And you know what? Maybe you don't get exactly out of everything you want, but you're going to be happy with the life you lived versus the other way, because I've seen the other way, and it isn't pretty. Be your own life. Be true to yourself in this life. And that is by all the different spectrums of what true is. Be true to yourself and ask yourself questions all the time. It's like Einstein said, imagination is more important than intelligence in scientific and he really, I don't know if he said this, in life discoveries. You know, you have to have that imagination. You have to try to imagine something that you'd like to create, make a joke, write a poem, do some stuff all the time, and you will constantly remain imaginative and creative. And that way, when your boss says, think out of the box, like I said, it won't be a hard problem for you, because you were probably already creating an answer of your own anyway before he asked, because that's just what you do. I tell you one, it's always a struggle for everyone to feel like, I wonder if I'm good enough, I wonder if I have something. But I think those are all the wrong questions. You know, people need to quit asking themselves what they think of other people's thoughts about themselves, and they need to start thinking more about what would make them happy and what might actually help other people. We're all artists, all the way back to when, you know, 20, 30,000 years ago, when people saw rocks on the side of a cave and thought, oh, that looks a little like a cow. You know, they were thinking, they were imagining. We have imagination in all of us. One of the worst things people can do is imagine that you can't, because we do have such imaginational powers that if you imagine that there's something that prevents you from accomplishing something, then I tell you one thing, I know you're not going to be able to accomplish it, because one of the most powerfulest forces in your life has already been turned against you, your imagination. You say no, then no will be it, because you wrote it into the program. But if you remove all the I could never, and if you wanted to just try, I almost assure you very soon you'd find out that you could, and always could, and probably could have done it a lot better had you started earlier. It allows me to go into a creative world that, you know, where there's just no comparison. There's parts of your imagination that you can get so focused to that you know, it's just a beautiful place to be, where you're creating something, and as it's coming alive, it's just, you know, building you full of enthusiasm. You race and you race and you race, and then you remember you maybe made a mistake, and it all sinks in, and it's all for nothing, and now you got to scrape it all off. But it was still fun. It was just fun to do. what I do in particular is knowing a little bit about the biology of the eye and stuff like that. I take these reflective type minerals and other chemicals, but mainly minerals and rocks and stuff like this, little colored rocks. And I know approximately some effects that they're going to give, whether they feel like they sink in or they come out. And I try to describe something, a reality, a different reality, but a reality that if someone will look at the patterns that I lay down as far as what counts for dark and you know, because I could change it to anything, but the colors that I pick become particularly important to give out the tone of the painting. And if people will give you their imagination just for a little while, and then you put them onto a painting, then they are flexing and working out that all-important imagination. And then a little bit of like a magical thing just would happen at that point, a little bit of telepathy, because this person is now seeing into my mind. And I can't see into his mind, but if I do this right, and if I can get someone's imagination, if I can borrow it just for a second and have them look at my painting and they read it, if they share an imagination like mine, and sometimes that's what it requires, because you will often hear people say, well, that's not the kind of paintings I like, or that is not the style that I like. Everyone does have their own particular style, but it is indicative of the imagination that they possess. I have maybe a peculiar imagination, but I also think I share imagination with a lot of people. And when people will give me enough time for them to read up and down with their minds and scan what I'm counting as opaque darks and what I'm counting as lights, they start to see another picture, a more perfect picture. And the reason why they're seeing that is because they're doing it. They're doing it with me, but they're adding their imaginations to my paintings, and a little bit of magic happens right there. And why I think that's important for people today is because I don't think we take time out to have our imaginations create anything anymore. I mean, I'm not trying to be the old folk, yeah, back in the day, we used to imagine everything, because it kind of was, but at the same time, that's not what's happening. What's happening is that people have devices that are replacing their memories and almost teaching them a little bit that it's not important to try to remember. And then also, if you don't have to imagine something, you could just watch a TV show and imagine it's happening. That's imagining, right? Well, that's imagining, yeah, but you're not doing the imagining. You're just watching the imagining. And there are different levels of imagination type skills and stuff that people don't even do anymore and aren't really even all that interested in it. And I find that scary, because that's what made us human to begin with, was our imagination, and it has been our strongest feature as of yet, the best I know. I mean, I think it was said once by the Sun Tzu, the sharpest weapon a man ever, or the sharpest weapon man ever created was a handshake. I would add no imagination. Man's imagination is the deadliest and most powerful and the most helpful tool that we have in our books, and we should start using them again, because I'm not sure what happens to humanity once it loses its imagination. About the only thing to know about the biology of vision is that you have light receptors inside your lens, and they work a little bit more peculiarly than most people are led to believe. There's a couple of them of the light sensitive cells in your cornea that are bigangular cells, where if one color is yellow, its opposite is violet. If I shine enough white or yellow in your face, and then if I remove that light from your eye real fast, a purple square would remain in approximately the same space. That's because one side of that cell was overstimulated, and if it's cut off too fast, both cells have to be activated. So if one's cut off, then there's only another thing left, and that would be the opposite or the complement of whatever color of light was shining in your eye. So your vision is interpretive, if one should be able to put it like that. Everyone's vision is a little bit different, and I think a person says, it's a famous question, is your red my red? And the answer is no, if you ask me. But I could be wrong about that. But personally, I think that vision and interpretation of your reality and stuff like that is all a construct of your imagination. And I'm not trying to say it as in well, reality doesn't exist. Reality definitely exists, but the way you interpret it is by your imagination interprets the reality that you're in. And the reason why I believe that is because if you go back to where we were all pattern recognizing little monkeys out on the playground of life, where tag you're it means you're dead that day. So the only thing that we had in our favor is we could kind of anticipate a thing going to happen. Like, I can anticipate if I saw a lion moving, I can anticipate if I don't move, he won't see me because I know he's not looking in my direction. Now, that requires a certain amount of analytical tool for that animal to be able to do that, and that is how we survived. So imagination not only took the information from the light that's being shown into your eyes and then reinterprets it in your brain as a picture you think you see, but the imagination itself also reconstructs that. And that's what you're really probably more in your mind looking at, is your imagination of a reality. If you think more about what drives your eyes to perform the task that it does, that fools you into believing you're seeing the picture you believe you're seeing, you'd realize that there's a biology that was developed through evolution that makes this possible, this whole give and take with the eyes, and why it is that our eyes work, and particularly the way that they do. So, but if you ask me, imagination is what, in the in run from your eyesight into your brain, what reconstructs it. And the reason why is there's lots of good tests that you can do that will show you what I'm talking about, like the fact that your focus is approximately like a quarter about so far. Only that little dot where your bioangular vision is coming to, can you determine or see anything with any certainty. But if you put that out there, you look around it, I still think I see the rest of the room around that. And it seems like I see it in color, and it seems like I mean, it looks like it's all exactly, and when I look at it, it almost looks exactly as I thought I looked at it in my peripheral vision. So why is that? Well, your brain has a working memory, and unless something moves, it doesn't re-investigate. Your eye is, or your visual focal point moves around like a jumping maniac, taking bits and pieces of information that's in front of you and relaying it to your brain. Every time something moves, the cornea or the cones on the outside of your optic light center, the cones, they're particularly interested in movement because that's where your attacks would come from. If you're going to be attacked, you're going to be attacked from the side. So you don't need to have total good vision on the side. You just have to have motion detectors that grab those. Those feed your brain, and your brain remembers what color it was. The truth is there's not a big distinction. It's just how much one animal can to how much other animals might. We're kind of in the honey spot of this planet being, I mean, besides imagination, standing upright probably did us about as good too. We were able to actually look over and see what was going on and, crouch down or do whatever we were going to do to survive in the grasslands where our species originates from. But if we didn't have that imagination, we wouldn't have gotten so far. And if we didn't have even more imagination than the imaginations of like your regular chimpanzees who imagine stuff all the time, but we can anticipate consequences that are seen and unseen because we have a very good imagination, and it makes us special as a species. But once you remove, I think if you remove that from the human species, the imagination, you would have an extremely dysfunctional animal that was neither stronger than other animals, nor faster than other animals, nor having stronger teeth than other animals. If you get thrown into a pit with wild dogs, you're probably done for it. I don't care how much of a Jackie Chan you are. The animals are fast and they're very powerful, and we've lost that bit if we ever had it, which we probably did. But imagination was more powerful than that. But that's why we are a powerful species on this planet, is because we had that ability. But kind of strangely, because of all the adaptations that we made our society, we definitely synthetic this world to our own personal needs. As a matter of fact, that's exactly the scientific era we're supposed to be in. I forget the name, you can look it up, but they've just basically named this epoch of Earth the one where man polluted it to such a degree that every living thing was being affected by us. So I don't know what we're going to do as a species if we don't clean up our act a little bit on that. And I imagine a little imagination might go a long way in developing a answer for it. We do have eyes that could see ultraviolet light, but we don't have brains that can see it because there's no information from ultraviolet light that evolution thought would be necessary for our survival or a survival type technique. We wanted to have a more specific vision, one that was more easily to detect branches that might get in your eye and stuff like that. And there are also tests that prove that that's how your eye's biology works. You are a pattern recognizer. If you look at the picture, the double image picture where a woman is brushing her hair in the mirror, and then some people see that, and then just for a flash you see a skull, and then it's a woman with her brushing her hair in the mirror, and then it's a skull, back and forth. The reason why you can't see both of them at the same time is different modalities of your brain is reconstructing those patterns independently of anything else. It's just what our brains are built for. It's what our brains are made for, pattern recognizing, to such a point that we even try to find patterns in things that have no patterns, and then we believe those patterns are more relevant than facts that we find that just proves those patterns were a delusion or an illusion. I can tell you this, a lot of people, though, don't understand science at all. I do understand it some. I understand it enough to respect it and to listen to what those who have the most experience in dealing with these particles and the quanta. I have a cell phone. My cell phone works. My microwave works. We can do all kinds of incredible things right now. These people were able to determine all of this by mathematical equation alone, because they can't actually reach out and touch an electron in order to know its space between it and the neutron or the proton, but the electrons, they can't even I don't even believe that there's any way for them to map an electron now, but they can grab atoms, but they can't map electrons, but they can know how they operate. Now, if someone wants to question those type of people, all they got to do is come up with the equation that proves them wrong, and then show it to them, and I'm sure that they will admit to their mistakes. And if you can't do that, because if you're like me, you drink entirely too much for whatever reason, you can't do that, then you at least got to recognize that there is really like 1 million physicists that are recognized legitimate physicists. Now, I've been around men all my life. I can't believe that 2 of them could ever keep a secret for more than a month. So if they were just all fucking with us, and then they have kept this secret for well over 100-something years, and they're just messing with it, then why does our cell phones work? Is it just fairy dust? I mean, these people know what they're doing. If you don't know what an isotope is, you shouldn't even enter the conversation about climate change. You should just automatically go to the box of, I believe, because I'm too lazy to look it up for myself. Because an isotope is not very hard to conceive, but if you don't know what it is, then you don't really know what the subject matter is anyway, so how could you know whether or not it was right or wrong? You don't even know what you're talking about. If we can recognize that we have that kind of power, we also have to recognize how vulnerable we are by not using our imaginations fully enough to protect us once again from the things that we cannot ourselves perceive. And that would probably be the destruction of this planet by not having ultraviolet light eyes that could detect ultraviolet light, because we would be able to see the megatons of carbon being released in our atmosphere, which someone would say, well, it always has done that. Actually, it did not always do that, and there was very good reasons why it did not always do that, and that's because of the vegetation that is on the planet. But we have mass-wide world deforestation of giant parts of this planet. There are bits and pieces of Walmart plastic bags at the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean wrapped around a sea turtle's neck as we speak. We have done stuff on this planet that had never been done before, and not by a little, but by a lot, megatons. Now, a lot of people don't know what a ton is, because a ton sounds like a lot of weight, but if you don't work in tons, you don't know what a ton is, and if you don't know what hundreds of tons of things look like, what would you know about one that's being released into our atmosphere every week? Now, that stuff spins up there, because one thing that a lot of people are not bringing up is the fact that nothing, literally nothing, escapes our atmosphere. Basically all stays here. So you got millions of tons up there, and it's spinning around. Yeah, you can't see it very much, but you know what? I don't see germs, but I know if I look under a microscope, I can see them. So I know they exist because I can see them. And that's a kind of the problem with a lot of human thinking is, I want to see it to believe it. Not a lot of proof about what's going up there, but there are cameras and there are other things that you could look at. And I think most people would be well served if they would look at, and just to see what it looks like is going up out of those power plants and out of our cities and off of our own bodies and out of our own cars and stuff, and then say you're not worried. At least take a real good look at it. What has happened is a very unnatural state from where we came from. Our imagination, which once got very powerful, and it was also pretty malicious as well, overtook us and almost seemed to put us all into a spiral of conquest and of wars and distrust and the we's and the they's, as if there are we's and they's. But here's the thing, you have to have an imagination to believe that there's a we's and the they's, because you know what they think we're talking about? Yeah, them. And we are, and you know what they're talking about? Us. But I don't mean anyone any harm, and I know my friend Stephen means no one any harm, and I know plenty of other people that don't mean anyone any harm, and I guarantee you the only things that's separating the we's and the they's is the belief that there are we's and they's. If we can just get rid of that idea, and I mean altogether, it would probably serve better if we started thinking of humanity as the us's. Because, I mean, really, I don't believe I've ever heard a conspiracy theory that didn't have at least one or two batshit nutty into it, and then with no motivation of why people would do these things. And then they totally disregard the environmental pressures that cause all these problems with these fictitious, these people are trying to take over the world, or these people are trying to overthrow the we's and the they's and stuff. You know what? They probably are apprehensive because they know you're thinking about them too. America should kind of rethink that as the way we go about doing our foreign policy as well. Because when we think about trade, I guarantee you we're going to be doing better with a China like we have now than the China of the 1970s. And as long as they have motivation to do what's right, they will stop thinking that we's are after them. Because why would they think that? Oh, if they watched our TV, all they would hear is China and China and China, and then we make movies where China maybe invades us on a second Red Dawn, but then they changed it to Vietnam, and I can't even remember one, but because China didn't like it, and China doesn't like it. China doesn't like it when we talk about them like that, and we're scared of them, and we're causing a situation. They have all the motivation right now to go in the direction of a more democratic society, and they kind of do. And although I'm not professing that I think China's a model of any kind of civilization that has a lot of human rights and stuff values, but I'm not sure that there's that many other countries that are quite as good as they think they are either. So if we stopped, you know, really kind of giving them the fodder to believe that we're after them, which they definitely get from us, maybe we'd get along a lot better, and who knows, maybe then we'd be an even more powerful world, because I have to believe with an infinite universe out there, even religious people have to conclude that it must have been a maker's will for us to go out there into this infinite universe, or otherwise why would he have just created us to put us in the center of a magnificent universe that we never see? I think all Christians and Muslims and Judaisms and Hindus, they should all put together a fund and try to help SpaceX, or any of the other people that want to go out in space, because obviously that's what our end goal is aimed at. Language and talking is absolutely very good for not only the people who are involved, the interlocutors, but also the societies that are in places where people are allowed to talk. Well, we're becoming a country where you're not allowed to talk because you don't know who's going to be offended. And I don't even remember when I was at a bar and I'm certain I brought up Trump and was probably laughing about him. I could not care less, though, if people told me that they're going to vote for Trump and they were serious. I'm very much with good. Do what you think is right. I would think that would be a horrible decision, and I might laugh a little bit, but I'm sure you're somehow laughing about my decision or how I feel about things. So I'm not scared to have someone tell me they think I'm wrong. And I don't know why everyone else is so scared that if, like, I don't like their opinion, something bad could happen. The worst could happen is maybe I find out why it is people think differently than me, and you educate me, or I educate you. I mean, but we sharpen our mental edges by having communication. We understand our own reflective quality best by other people's response to what we say. So you see what I mean? And when you take a human being, you take him out of society and you put him in isolation for a considerable amount of time, what you end up with is pretty much a madman, and they've known that forever, and they still put people in solitary confinement for years and years at a time, and they're all bats crazy. Well, not all, but most of them would be, and we've known that all the way from the beginning of America till now, because the old Quakers used to have where you get the word penitentiary comes from them, from making penitence, and they block you in a room and you had to repent. Penitence and penitentiary. Except for they lock them by themselves in the room all the time. That was just it. You weren't allowed to talk to no one, look at another, do nothing. You get to be in there and be sorry. And those guys came out really messed up all the time. That was just it. That's how you go in there. You might as well kill them.
They did that in concentration camps too.
Well,
look at the wall and just
people that are done that way, I think it's Frederick the Great. Yes, 17th, 18th century German emperor, who was apparently an amazing man about many other things, but one of the things he did is he thought that what he would like to do is he would take all these orphans from the wars that he was having and he would raise them, but he would raise them to be emotionless because he didn't want them to be hurt for what had happened to them, and he also wanted to use them as soldiers like the sultans did way back when. So he made sure that the nurses and other stuff, they didn't pick them up, didn't interact with them, they just fed them, take care of them. All of them had to be put to death after a few years because they were so batshit crazy and torn up emotionally that, you know, they were just destroyed. I think it was supposed to be one of those things that he regretted most about his entire life was when he had done to those children, unintentionally, because he didn't know that there was an effect of it. But that's the effect. When people stop talking, when people stop communicating, when people no longer have the right or the moral bravery to say what the hell they think, then we're going to have a country that isn't even a country. It's just a big spot with a bunch of different countries mixed all in, because we have to start communicating, and we have to stop our own. I mean, right now, well, I'm not going to get into all of the country because I could not fix all of a painting inside a couple of days, but if I had enough wine, I'm sure I could. But you know, we have a country that is definitely scared to talk to each other, and I think that if they looked at more paintings, took in more orchestras, did more new things that they had not done before just to see, well, what they would find is when their bosses command them to do the one thing that they were genetically designed to do, like think out of the box, they'd actually be able to, because it's something you do routinely if you have a lot of imagination and creativity. In fact, I find it very difficult sometimes for me to think inside the box because I just see a whole bunch of different ways to look at things most of the time.
Beautiful.
I think everything will go all right. And I think that it's about the best anyone can sit back and try to think. And someone could say, well, there's so many reasons why that won't happen. And I say, well, there's a whole lot of reasons why pattern recognizing monkeys shouldn't be driving cars. But we are. We went pretty far and we did a lot of strange, weird things throughout human history and stuff. But we got to know we're just a blink on the blink in time for the history of this world. We've just started off, and we could head in a good manner now and save ourselves from a lot of suffering, and maybe, the suffering of all other parts of the life too. But one way or the other, we're already an unstoppable force in this universe. We will be going on. I don't know that necessarily we'll be on this planet. I don't know what will happen, but I guarantee you we have enough science right now that when people quit playing games and quit BSing and stuff like that, they could do all kinds of amazing things right now that would make a human being very livable in extreme weathers, stuff like that. It's genetic. They've got all kinds of different therapies and just different treatments that if they were allowed to go full forward on and stuff like that, would stop a lot of humanity's suffering. It's just, but then you've got a situation like how you have in Pakistan where we could end polio, very close to ending polio, but now there's a giant polio outbreak in Afghanistan. And the reason why is because imams have been telling them that the polio vaccination was a Christian Jewish conspiracy to turn them all sterile in order to destroy Islam. So they refused to some refused to give it to their children. I got to watch on Vice a show on HBO that where this father who believed that and brought his daughter believing that she was just sick. She's just sick. She doesn't have polio in her head. Hey, no, she's polio. She's going to be a cripple for the rest of her life. You didn't let her have, and he refused to let her have the vaccination. Him just standing there, and you could just see it in his eyes. He could not believe the nightmare that he'd been led to by the people he had believed. We have a little bit of a problem in this world where we think that people who are smart are maliciously dangerous, and typically smart people aren't very dangerous people. Almost all the smartest people I knew, from doctors, nurses, and so forth, they were all pretty calm and reasonable people to whom I could never perceive them trying to purposely be malicious. Yet at the same time, I've seen a lot of people who were successful who weren't smart. And they were not so inclined to philanthropic courses. They were a little bit more meaner. So we do have a problem in this world, and we can correct it. We can correct every problem we have with imagination, because there wouldn't be any life if we didn't have imagination. It's a power. It's like a muscle, and if you don't learn how to work that imagination muscle, well, then things might go worse for humanity.
Whoa.